Welcome to the audiobook channel. Here, we bring you a treasure trove of knowledge and entertainment from classic literature to inspiring modern books. We hope to bring you interesting and rewarding experiences, making it easy for you to access knowledge whether you are on the go or relaxing at home. Join us in exploring the world of fascinating stories and valuable lessons through each page of the book. How to Win Friends and Influence People. Part 1. 6 Ways to Make a Good Impression. How to Win Friends and Influence People. Part 1. Chapter 6. Chapter 6. Making Things Go Smoothly. Recalling the year 1898, a tragedy occurred in the town of Roarland, New York. That cold and slippery snowy morning, Joe Farley went to the stable, pounded the saddle to attend a child's funeral, when the horse suddenly became restless and kicked him, killing him on the spot, leaving behind his wife, 3 sons and a few $100s in insurance money. His eldest son, Jim, 10 years old, had to drop out of school to work for a living at a brick factory. He did everything from pushing a shovel, pouring dirt into molds and arranging bricks to dry in the sun. Jim was not fortunate enough to have a good education, but with his natural cheerfulness, he easily made others like him. As the years passed, the boy from back then became an experienced man, who entered politics and became a politician with an uncanny ability to remember people's names. He never attended any university, but before the age of 46, for universities awarded him honorary degrees, and he became chairman of the Democratic National Committee and general director of the United States Post Office. I once interviewed Jim Farley and asked him the secret of his success. He replied, "Hard work." I replied, "Don't joke." He asked me back what I thought made him successful. I replied, "I know you can remember the names of 10,000 people." He replied, "No, you're wrong. I can remember the names of 50,000 people." It was this special ability that helped Jim Farley bring Franklin Roosevelt to the White House when he ran Roosevelt's presidential campaign in 1932. During his years of struggling with life, going through many jobs, sometimes selling for a plaster factory, sometimes in charge of the Stanford City Hall, he built up a rule of remembering people's names. Whenever he first met someone, he would learn their full name, as well as some facts about their family, work, and political views. He would memorize all this information meticulously, like the details of a picture. The next time he met them, even a year later, he would still shake their hand and ask about their family or about the plants in their backyard. In this way, he won the affection of many people. Before Roosevelt's presidential campaign, Jim Farley wrote hundreds of letters to voters every day in the western and northwestern states. Then, in 19 days, he traveled to 20 states, nearly 20,000 kilometers, using various means of transport. At each place, he expressed his concerns to voters through intimate meetings, morning tea, lunch or dinner, then set off again to begin a new journey. As soon as he returned to the East, he wrote to his closest relatives in each region he had visited, and asked them for a list of people who had attended his lectures. Eventually, the list grew to tens of thousands of names. Yet, every single person on the list received a personal letter from Jim Farley. The letters usually began with, "Dear Bill," or, "Dear Charles," and were always signed simply, Jim. Jim Farley soon discovered that the average person cares more about his or her own name than about all the other names on earth combined. Simply remembering a person's name and pronouncing it correctly is a subtle and effective compliment. If you forget or mispronounce someone's name, you put yourself in a very uncomfortable position. I once organized a lecture course in Paris and sent out letters to all the American citizens living in the city. The typists, who were not very good at English, made many mistakes when typing in their names. The director of a large American bank in Paris later wrote me a scathing remark because his name was misspelled. Sometimes it is difficult to remember a person's name, especially when it is difficult to pronounce. Many people do not even learn how to pronounce it, and instead call the person by a nickname to make it easier to remember. Sid Levy visited a customer whose first name was Nicodemos Papadopoulos, but most people called him Nick. Levy said, "I tried to pronounce his name for weeks before I visited him. When I greeted him by his full name, 'Hello, Mr. Nicodemos Papadopoulos,' he was very surprised. After a few minutes of silence, he said with emotion, 'Mr. Levy, in the 15 years I have lived in this country, no one has ever called me by my name correctly. Do you know what brought success to Andrew Carnegie? He was called the Steel King of America. Thousands of people who worked for him had much more knowledge about steel than he did, but he knew how to treat people. This made him rich. He also showed early organizational skills and a natural talent for leadership. At the age of 10, he discovered the incredible importance of calling people by their first names, and he used this discovery to gain their enthusiastic cooperation throughout his life. As a young boy in Scotland, he raised a pair of rabbits. Soon he had a litter of baby rabbits, but the problem was that he had nothing to feed them. One fine day, he had a bright idea. He told the boys and girls in the area that if they could find enough clover and dandelions to feed the rabbits, he would name each baby rabbit after them. The plan worked like magic and Carnegie never forgot it. Years later, he made millions of dollars by using this same psychology in business. For example, Andrew Carnegie wanted to supply steel rails to the Tisvania Railway Company, of which Edgar Thomson was the president. So he built a huge steel mill in Pittsburgh and called it the Edgar Thomson Steel Mill. Guess who Edgar Thomson bought the steel from when the Tisvania Railroad needed steel for its rails? The art of remembering and honoring the names of friends and business associates was one of Carnegie's secrets to successful leadership. He was proud that he could call many of his workers by their first names, and that there was never a strike at the steel mills during his tenure. Ben Sinlov, director of the Texas Chamber of Commerce, believed that as a corporation grew, it became more and more distant, and he offered a solution. One way to connect the corporate spirit was to remember people's names. Any executive who said he couldn't remember his employees' names was missing an important part of his job. Karen Criss, a flight attendant for American Airlines in California, made a habit of learning the names of passengers in the cabin and using them when serving them. Passengers were so pleased with her service that they wrote letters of praise to the company and to her personally. One passenger wrote, "This is the first time I have flown with American Airlines, but from now on, I will only fly with this airline. Your service style is very special, sincere, and that is important to me." People are very proud of their own names and try to leave their names at all costs. For centuries, aristocrats and tycoons have sponsored artists, musicians, and authors, rarely, except to have their names respectfully placed on the first page of their works in the dedication and thanks section. Libraries and museums, which have the richest collections, are thanks to people who do not want their names to disappear from the memory of humanity. The New York Library has the Esto and Linos collections. The Government Museum maintains the names of Benjamin Altman and Chappies Morgan. Almost every church is decorated with stained glass windows with the names of its patrons. Many buildings and lecture halls of most universities are named after people who have donated large sums of money to the school. Most of us fail to remember other people's names, simply because we often blame it on being busy and not taking the time and effort necessary to concentrate on remembering, repeating and ingraining that information in our minds. For many people, a name is simply a name. This notion is completely wrong. When we can remember and call another person's name accurately and intimately, it proves that we have shown a sincere interest in that person, and of course, those who are sincerely interested in us will also have the same feelings for us. President Franklin Roosevelt was obviously a very busy man, yet he still took the time to remember and be able to repeat the names of everyone, including an ordinary mechanic he had the opportunity to meet. The story is that the Chrysler Corporation built a special car for the president because he could not use a normal car due to paralysis in both legs. Ann Chamberlain, the Chrysler man, described the delivery of the car to the president at the White House in a letter to me, as follows. "When I arrived at the White House, the president greeted me very warmly. He called me by my first name, which made me feel very comfortable and especially impressed me that he was really interested in what I had to say. The car was designed to be operated entirely by hand." In front of the crowd gathered around to admire the car, he commented, "Wonderful. Just push a button and it runs without any effort. Beautiful. I don't know how it works. Someday I have time. I must take it apart and see." When the president's friends and collaborators admired the car, he said to me, "Mr. Chamberlain, I really appreciate the time and effort you have spent to create this car. It is truly wonderful." The president looked at the radiator, the rearview mirror, the clock, the special lights, the upholstery, the driver's seat, the separate suitcases in the trunk with the letters crossed on each suitcase. He paid attention to every detail and made a point of highlighting these parts, so that Mrs. Roosevelt, Miss Jenkins, the Secretary of Labor, and his personal secretary would notice them. After I had finished instructing him, the president said, "Mr. Chamberlain, I've kept the Federal Reserve waiting for 30 minutes. I must get back to work." I had brought along a mechanic. He was very shy, standing back, not saying a word. The president had only heard me introduce him by name once, when he first arrived. Yet before leaving, the president found the mechanic, shook his hand, called him by his first name, and thanked him sincerely. A few days later, when I returned to New York, I received a signed portrait of President Roosevelt along with a note of thanks. Where does he find the time to do that? This is still a mystery to me. Franklin Roosevelt knew that one of the simplest, most effective and most important ways to win people's hearts is to remember their names and make them feel important. And how many of us have done that? One of the first lessons a politician learns is to remember the names of voters. Forgetting to do so is a sure way to lose your position. Just as in politics, the ability to remember names is also important in business and in social interactions. Napoleon III, Emperor of France, grandson of Napoleon I, proudly shared that despite his busy schedule, he still remembered the names of everyone he met. How did he do it? It was simple. If he didn't hear a name clearly, he would say, "Sorry, I didn't hear your name clearly." If it was an unfamiliar name, he would often say, "Sorry, how is your name spelled?" During the conversation, he repeated the name of the person he was talking to many times, and tried to remember it in combination with the facial features, demeanor and posture. If this was an important person, Napoleon III would be even more diligent. He would write the name on a piece of paper, look at it carefully, and concentrate on remembering it. In this way, the ears hear, the eyes see, the mind concentrates. The name will be remembered forever. All these good habits take time to practice and develop. We need to realize the magic hidden behind the name of each person. And when we remember that each name, no matter how simple, is the important thing and the joy of that person, therefore, the information we are exchanging, or the stories between the two sides, will become very special when they are filled with the heart, the name of the person we are communicating with, whoever they are, be it your friend or the CEO. A name can work wonders when used correctly. Good qualities are developed and honed with hard work and determination. Principle 6. Always remember that a person's name is the sweetest, most loving and most important sound to them. Thank you for following and supporting our channel. Your companionship is a great motivation for us to continue creating quality and useful content. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss our latest videos. Please click the subscribe button and turn on notifications to stay updated with interesting news and videos from us. Thank you very much.